Hi, I'm Falkingham, and in this video I'll be talking through demonstrations of my work in the game Yellow Sails. Environmental soundscapes and background sounds are incredibly important in any game. They help immerse the player in the game world, translating the space around them into something they can hear. With the technological constraints of the game engine RPG Maker MV in which the game was made, I wasn't able to utilise my prior experience with middleware such as Wise in creating 3D physics-based soundscapes. In Yellow Sails, I wanted to demonstrate the effects of sonic occlusion. This happens when an object sits in between the player and the sound source. To achieve this in a limited game engine, I chose to create individual soundscapes for each in-game screen. In this video, we can see the player on a coastal shore. They can hear the sounds of waves and gulls around them. They then move into a small room, where they can still hear the outside sounds, but through a series of filters to simulate the wall in between them. In this room, the player can also hear the sound of a large engine, and when they delve deeper into the building, they will find the source of the sound, which is so loud it masks any outside sound that would otherwise be audible. The simple filtered mixing of different soundscapes allowed me to create the effect of sonic occlusion without using 3D positional tracking systems that would be available in Unity, Unreal, Wise, and Fmod. In a dreaming exploration game where the player is constantly finding new and unique areas, one of the most essential sounds are footsteps. My approach in Yellow Sails was to create footsteps that match the unique visual style by creating step sounds for each surface. Due to the top-down camera angle, I felt a hyper-realistic sound would detract from the dreamlike gameplay. So I instead chose to create libraries of different steps that gave the impression of movement while still conveying to the player the surface texture of the level. Each surface in the game has a set of 8 step sounds. When the player moves, a random step will be played, creating variants. I started working on Yellow Sails during the coronavirus lockdown, so leaving my home studio was often out of the picture for recording new sounds. Due to this, I chose to create a small Foley stage that would allow me to close mic different elements. In this video, you can see the Foley pit I created to reproduce the sounds of walking on soft earth surfaces. In other situations, I chose to record interactions with the surface without directly walking on them. This video shows me recording the sounds of a wooden stick hitting a large rock. I then altered these sounds to give the impression of footsteps on a hard surface. In this next clip, I was tasked with creating footsteps on a thin metal floor. By using some spare metal sheets I had around, I recorded a series of hits, which I then mixed and layered to create the desired effect. Yellow Sails contains a mechanic in which the player searches for pieces of paper, each one containing a different image. When choosing how to sonify this effect, as it's a whole screen overlay, I decided a more realistic sound could work. By watching the animation, I then acted the Foley recording out myself, scrunching and unfolding a dollar bill. For some effects, I wasn't able to record a one-to-one item, such as in the case of the air conditioning unit outside the protagonist's apartment. As I didn't have one laying around, I instead chose to record the cooling fans on my computer. With a similar sonic texture due to many of the same mechanical elements, I pitched down my fan noise, and with some added EQing and mixing, I created a fairly realistic sound that could be added to the soundscape. When creating the sound effects for the game's UI, I wanted the menus to have a feeling of continuation from the general sound of the game. To make this, I chose to create a series of single action sounds with a soft texture, each sound being a note in the B minor triad. Most of the game's soundtrack being composed in the key of B minor, or its relative key, D major. When the player jumps into the menus, there is no dissonance in sound, and it feels like another element of the soundtrack or soundscape. I was fortunate to be asked to compose a soundtrack for Yellow Sails. Although music composition is not often seen as sound design, in this game I chose to incorporate elements of sound design within the music. As you can see in this video, the player is walking through a large open cave system. If I were able to work in middleware such as Wise, I would have created a much less reverb heavy track, and instead had the space around the musical source affect the sound. As that was not an option, I chose to imply and accentuate the large open space around the player by incorporating a heavy reverberation effect, while also including the sound effects of the whales in the rhythm of the music. Thank you for watching this video, and if you have any questions about my work, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I will hopefully be uploading the footsteps and other sound effects to a public library when the game gets a full release, so follow my Facebook and Instagram for that update.